you know, there is this silence about business and politics that people have kind of separated the two. It seems like we separated, but I hear a lot of other people really having the conversation. When they're having business is politics. So, you know, speak to a little bit about the intersection between business and politics, how you see it.
Well, first of all, I'm from Denmark, South Carolina. I don't know where Denmark is. We got 3 stoplights and a blinking light. And so my mom and dad, they would always say that the 2 most important words in the English language were the words thank you. And they're not nearly said enough. So before I begin, I want to say thank you for inviting me. Thank you to all of you all for welcoming me here so warmly. Isaac Williams is here with me. He's always with me. Thank you, brother, for being here. So I think the premise of your question in asking about this myth that business and politics are somewhat separated is only perpetuated many times within that African-American community. And I think that this actually has a lot to do with individual responsibility. African-Americans do not give to the political process the way that we should. And African-American business people, those individuals who are in the C-suite or very, very close, are oftentimes the only one who pull together resources to play their role in the political process. That doesn't mean that many of you all don't give, because you all have. I mean, you all have friends that run for office and you'll write a $100 check or you make a phone call. But we're talking about the sustained giving that's required to actually get your feet in the sand where the decisions are made. Also, I think that for a long period of time, African-American men have not held their weight in the political process, whether or not it's in the business world or the religious world or wherever it may be. We've seen that African-American women over the duration of time have always been the shoulders upon which change has been made in this country. People are elected. If you just go back and look, 96% of African-American women voted for Hillary Clinton. 13% of African-American men actually voted for Donald Trump. That number in his approval rating still remains the same today. And so when you have these things, you can start to look at some of the dichotomies that exist. But for me, we have to do a better job of holding our own weight, supporting people that we love, supporting people that represent our best interest, and begin to actually play the game.
So do you think that the difference between when the men is maybe correlated with kind of how we are being treated today?
No question about it. I think that, you know, there is a large segment of African-American men who were separated from their families due to Ronald Reagan's war on drugs and Bill Clinton's 94 crime bill. So no, I'm not casting any blame, but what I am saying is that the facts are the facts, and that African-American women, particularly those that are in the business field, have carried the change that we see in our country and have actually. Are you disagreeing with this premise?
Not at all.
I wanted you to go ahead and verbally disagree.
Well, no.
No, I was like, this does not look like the crowd that you should be disagreeing with.
Not at all. You know, and we had a section before this of our elite African American women in business, and you definitely won't want to disagree with them. And they're still here right now.
But I mean, I think the point that I'm trying to make is that we as a culture have to ingratiate ourselves in the business that is politics, right?
Yeah, I think that what I see, and you pointed out, is, you know, is right. It's actually permeates across our quest to be business owners and business leaders. You have to invest. You have to write the check. To be a part of the process, you need to own the process. That's my own personal opinion, but I'm not Bakari Sellers, so.
No, that's a good opinion to have.
But the reality,
we did a study, CNN did a study, CNN Money did a study with Kellogg, I believe it was. There's some CNNers in here, so please don't ask them, don't quote me. They are smarter than I about what we do. And what we said was that if we equalize the pay between white folk and black folk today, it would still take African Americans 220 years to catch up to the wealth of their white counterparts, right? Yeah. So, I mean, you have to understand the playing field and where you are. The New York Times, just a few weeks ago, did an illustration, and it's amazing that I'm in Atlanta talking about it, because there are a lot of rich people in Atlanta. There aren't a whole lot of wealthy people, and we carry ourselves as being rich but not wealthy, but I digress. And so, and it talked about the fact that African Americans who have reached a certain level of economic success would become poor quicker than their white counterparts who have reached that same level of success. And so, when you look at the institutional racisms and systems of oppression that we face, we still have to fight to deconstruct these systems. And in a room like this, it's necessary for me to say and challenge everyone under the sound of my breath that in order to deconstruct that system, it actually takes you playing a role and actually contributing real resources to the deconstruction thereof. Let me give you an example. Sorry for just ramshotting.
They're not here to listen to me.
Okay, so let me give you an example, because people oftentimes, I give you 2 examples about racism. For me, I don't care when people call me nigger. I get called nigger more than any of you all can possibly imagine, right? I mean, I'm on CNN. Like, you'd be surprised the things the mail that I get, the DMs that I get, the tweets that I get, the assault that my law staff goes through every day picking up the phone. So I don't get mad about that. And when people ask me about Charlottesville, for example, my retort is, what's the most amazing and outrageous part about Charlottesville, Virginia? And no, it wasn't them saying nigger, it wasn't them saying blood and soil, it wasn't them chanting or doing this or worshiping these Confederate monuments. It was the fact they were able to do all of this without wearing a hood, right? And so, and then you look at this not for just this surface racism, but you look at it institutionally and you say that 2 of those individuals just got fired from Wells Fargo. One of them was actually making decisions in California about loans. So you talk about African Americans and trying to go and get access to resources, and you're like, these are the people who were making the decisions about whether or not I get a $25,000 loan just to start my small business, right? So when you're looking at how how institutional racism affects African Americans, it makes sure that we have to do that much more. And the second thing is, I don't think that we look at racism institutionally. I always talk about our criminal justice system, which we know is broken. We have 100 cities in this country which have higher lead concentration in their water than Flint, Michigan. Many of them are black and brown communities. Kids are punished because of the zip code that they're born into in this country. Access to quality care. If you go in schools now, you see 13-year-olds that have never seen a dentist. You have 40-year-old women who are their parents who have never had a mammogram. I mean, the list, you just kind of talk about all of these pressures. You're drinking dirty water, going to bad schools, having too many contacts with police, and you can't get care when you need it. It really makes for depressive, I just made that word up, society.
It's a word.
But people,
Today, it's a word.
Today it's a word. I have a law degree which says it's going to be a word. But this is why this room is so important. This is why I want to be here with you guys, because like all of these depressive states that I'm talking about in these systems, we are on the brink. Like I don't know many wealthy people because we're still making our money now as African Americans. It's very generational. But we have the ability to begin to give our resources in a very efficient manner to help deconstruct these systems.
So specifically, these are probably some of the most successful people in the nation. We've got people who've flown here from Africa, some people flown here from London. These are senior leaders here. What should we be doing as the people who have access to riches but not wealth?
So two things. One, you have to get off your asses, because we get really comfortable real quick. A lot of y'all were comfortable when Barack Obama became president, and y'all thought that y'all had made it. So I think that's probably first. And number 2 is a lot easier for me, because I think it's something anyone can do. But how many of y'all know who Jacob Philadelphia is? Raise your hand. Okay. Jacob is probably the coolest person in the world. And Jacob was 4 years old, and I'm from South Carolina, and we have this saying that you can be casket sharp, right? And so the best you're gonna ever look is in the casket, right? You're gonna be fresh, you ain't gonna wrinkle, you're just gonna be laying there looking good. So Jacob was casket sharp, he was 4 years old, and whenever your parents are Secret Service agents, they get an opportunity to meet the protectee when they retire. Jacob's parents, or mother, I believe, actually was on the detail for Barack Obama. Jacob got an opportunity at 4 years old to go into the Oval Office, and Jacob had an opportunity to ask the 44th President of the United States any question that he wanted to. And do you know what Jacob asked Barack Obama? He said, "Does your hair feel like mine?" And so Barack Obama leaned over, and Jacob reached up and touched his hair. His name is Jacob. He's ironically enough from Philadelphia. And he was 4 years old at the time. And the reason that is probably my second favorite image from the White House, the first is in the Situation Room when we killed Osama bin Laden. But the reason this is the second is because Barack Obama then showed his importance, which Bernie Sanders can't figure out, but I digress, that Barack Obama was, even more importantly than anything else, he was an example, right? And so there are little brown people all across the world who believe that they can achieve the highest level of success in this country. And so that brings me to number two, which is that one of the things that you all have to do more of, and I'm always critical of my people, because if I can't be critical of y'all, I can't go on TV and be critical of Trump. Like, you have to begin to go back home to your communities, which you all have worked really diligently to get out of, but be an example. And why is that important? Because you can't tell a kid he can grow up and be a young black doctor if he ain't never seen one, right? You can't tell a kid that he can, oh my God, be like the COO of Starbucks. Shout out to the Spelmanite, who is going through pure hell right now. If they've never seen a COO, right? You have to be able to show these kids very tangible ideals and be able to, for lack of a better term, let them touch your hair. So get off your asses and be an example are probably the two most important things that you can do.
That's awesome. That's simply awesome. So let's pivot a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So generational divides. There's a couple of gentlemen, there's an organization here called the New Leadership Council. And a couple of those individuals we were having a conversation with maybe a year ago. These gentlemen probably are under 40, maybe even under 30, and they are, business owners. One owns a very well-known gallery here. And we had this conversation. He said, "You know what? I looked at some of the people that you have on your board, and they're really not people who are helping us." He said, and these are black folks talking about black folks. So
Angela says this all the time. Your skin folk ain't always your kinfolk.
So it's interesting, right? So they feel, it seems as though the generation, the millennials and younger, feel as though we.
How old are you?
54.
Ooh.
Yeah. Grecian formula. No. So what happens is that they feel that we are not reaching back. We talk about them,
No,
at them, but not to them.
Well, first of all, stop talking so much.
Yeah.
I was at an event with Tom Steyer here in Atlanta. I'm privileged to be in South Carolina, which is the first primary in the state, in the first primary in the South, excuse me. And so everybody running for president always calls you to come around the country and meet them and hang out with them. And Tom Steyer is a billionaire hedge fund guy he's the one running the impeach Trump now ads, right, on TV.
Oh, yeah.
Had an event in Atlanta, and somebody asked that question. And I said, first of all, I think everything's a science, right? This is kind of awkward for a liberal arts guy to say, but I think everything's a science. And so you have to take a step back and look at it. And millennials, which is what I am, not you, but millennials, which is what I am, and the generation after us are known as Generation Z. Mm-hmm. So Generation Z and millennials in 2024 will make up 49% of the electorate, which means we're choosing everything. We're trending more liberal, more progressive, more democratic, all of those things. But the irony in this is that Generation Z is going to be the first minority generation in this country, which is terrifying people. And just think about how dynamic Generation Z is. They've gone from us worrying about them eating Tide Pods to like leading the movement on gun control in 2 months. They are a fascinating group to watch grow and matriculate. And so people oftentimes ask, how do we cultivate and how do we harness this energy? And the first thing I say is you have to kind of take a step back, right? Every bit of change that we've had has been led by women and young people in the country. The civil rights movement, gay rights movement, suffragette movement, all were women and young people who led these movements. But even more importantly, young people They all know someone who's gay. They all know someone who's Muslim. They all know a dreamer. They all know a transgender. They all know, so our world growing up is so diverse. Thomas Friedman wrote that the world is flat. The world is fundamentally flat because now we're not competing with people from Southwest DeKalb or Redan. We're actually competing with people from India and Indonesia and Asia because of technology. Our world is fundamentally flat. And so you have generations that don't have preconceived notions. They can reach out and have conversations halfway across the world in 140 characters, who understand that protest is messy and protest is oftentimes somewhat uncomfortable, but who are so socially conscious that we are disrupting the playing field in business. I mean, the Me Too movement has risen out of this. Occupy Wall Street has risen out of this. Black Lives Matter has risen out of this. You're destroying the playing field and the ecosystem that you have to deal with. And so many people say, how do you engage these young people? I say, shut up and listen. I mean, that's the best way. Now, we don't get everything right, but it's okay to listen and meet us where we are. I'm not coming to your church to have a meeting with you after, and I got to wear a suit and all of this other stuff. Meet me somewhere where I am.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. I mean, we're starting to be the people who have to listen. We look at some of the things that millennials or the younger generation does that we see as maybe not as the way we would have done it. For example, they say they'll go back and live at home. Millennials got kids too. They're not living at home unless they brought their kids home. But the reality is maybe going into debt is not really good. Maybe using generational wealth by going back home actually works. So it really supports a lot of the moves that you see, and maybe going to work for a company for 25 years and dedicating everything. We had one individual who's in their 50s, had worked for a company for 25 years and given a whole lot and been decorated at a super vice presidential level, but couldn't get their kid an interview with that same company. Okay, so therefore had to go and just really rush and become a part of the process. So the question is why, we have to rethink them. The younger generations, I don't like to say millennials because there's more than just millennials. They don't have the same level of dedication of I want to go watch, I want to
That's
be
not
here
true.
25 years.
No. First of all, it's hard to gauge
Yeah.
how we feel about being somewhere 25 years when I'm 33 years old.
Yeah. So let me push back.
Yeah, please do.
My father worked in a factory for 30 some odd years. So my Toledo, Ohio, we were the other Detroit. We would work, and we always
slide
saw
over a little bit.
So, right. So we would always see that. So it's just what you see. My son, Matthew, 21, he's not even thinking about it. He says, I see what you guys have gone through, and I'm not taking that route. He took his own route, similar to what Kelsey talked about earlier. Now he works with Jaden Smith as his graphic artist, and he proved me wrong.
Yeah.
Similar to Marcus Johnson earlier today. But the reality is, my point is, what the younger generation may be doing is absolutely correct.
But the economy is changing.
Yes.
So the economy is changing. So, due to trade and all these other things, those factory jobs are no longer there.
No.
So to expect, and they're not coming back.
No. Wait a minute, say that again.
They're not coming back. In fact, most of y'all are going to be replaced by computers. So, anyway, artificial intelligence, AI, is what people are investing in that nobody. While y'all out here just betting on Bitcoin, y'all need to be investing on and betting on AI. So anyway, but the economy is changing, and so young people. Your generation had no such thing as a YouTube millionaire.
No.
We
didn't have cell phones. Keep going.
You didn't have the little bag in the car? Y'all didn't have the little that you unzip, that you pick up with the cord?
We had a Palm Pilot.
My mama had one of those, and she unzip it, and it would sit right there. So yeah, but no.
You're gonna go there. We might as well go there, right? Exactly.
So no, the economy is changing, and our generation is adapting to that. But our generation is and the generation behind us is so socially conscious and aware that I will take that over any dollar they can make. There comes a time when you kind of have to make a choice about what you want your obituary to read, right? It's okay to go out and be very successful. And because I mean, I pay $2,400 a month in student loans, right? So that's very difficult. That's onerous. You know, you want to go out and you've done everything the country's asked you to do, right? You've gone to college, you got a law degree. I got a good like 4-5 jobs. Like, I'm doing everything the country's asked me to do, but yet you still have this stranglehold on you of trying to buy a house and raise a 12-year-old and have a wife and doing all these other things when you got to pay $2,400 a month to get the education that you told me I needed, right? Yep. And so you have a new generation who's undertaking all of these things, and although you try to break those shackles, I think there's a larger value in the DeRays and the Britneys and everyone else raising their voices against the injustices we see every day.
Yeah, you know, we have within our organization, we have Frederick Underwood, Katrina, Jamil. We have individuals who are in the generation that we're focusing on. How do we enroll, envelop, and support, you know, where they're going? We've kind of identified who's next within the organization. We continue to try to find out who's next.
Well, that's good.
From that standpoint, you know, nationally, you have a great view of the mountaintop. In your view, who's next? As a business leader, as a national leader, who's moving the needle next?
African Americans?
African Americans.
So that's an interesting question, and I'm glad you're actually cultivating that, because one of the things that black folk have a real serious problem of is actually allowing the next person to breathe.
Oh my God. Okay.
So
absolutely.
Whether or not it's in business or politics. I mean, look at my friend John Lewis, or Jim is this tape? Or Jim Clyburn, or the list goes on and on and on. You have, you know, 70, 80-year-old leaders who stay, right? Or whether or not it's the church. Have I mentioned the church yet? Because y'all church folk don't like to let go of nothing. Y'all been deacon for 27 years. Like, go sit in the third pew, not just the first. Like, it's okay to sit in the third and fourth pew on Sunday. So I'm glad that you're actually doing that. Who's next? I mean, I don't. That's a difficult question to answer, because you have a lot of burgeoning talent, and it doesn't take but one vine, minute clip on Instagram. I mean, I look at Jaden. You're talking about Jaden Smith. I look at how talented Jaden Smith is, or who's on the front of Time magazine? Tiffany Haddish. Tiffany Haddish is on the front of Time magazine when they're talking about the 100 most influential people, not in Southwest Georgia, in the world. Yeah. And the cover is a black woman named Tiffany Haddish, who was homeless not that long ago. And so, you know, the rise that you can have now, I mean, the world is really your oyster. It's just really harder for black folk to crack it. And so we can get there. So who's next is an interesting question. I'm just glad that people are actually evaluating that.
Yeah, absolutely. So our next segment, we're going to bring some leaders up as well to have a conversation. My last question for you is, can you call Soledad O'Brien and see if she can come next year? Angela Rye, you know.
Yeah, they not really going to do it out the goodness of their heart, though. Can you call Coca-Cola?
Hold on. Not for me. But for you.
Yeah, nah, she going to be like, I love you, Bakari, but.
Okay.